A virgin woman agrees to marry a millionaire to save her family from bankruptcy. The millionaire, known for his cold heart, hid a past no one could have imagined. What started as a sham turned into a love story. No contract could stop. If this story got you hooked, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and tell us which city you're watching from. Stay tuned. Olivia Bennet stared at the imposing steel and glass skyscraper that dominated the Boston skyline. Her reflection in the polished doors revealed a woman she barely recognized, someone desperate enough to consider an arrangement that went against everything she believed in. Taking a deep breath, she adjusted her tailored blazer and stepped into the elevator that would take her to the penthouse office of Alexander Reed, CEO of Reed Enterprises, and possibly her family's last hope. "You must be Miss Bennet," a sleek assistant greeted her when the elevator doors opened. "Mr. Reed is expecting you. Follow me." The corner office was minimalist to the extreme, all clean lines, monochromatic colors, and strategic lighting that highlighted various architectural awards on the walls. Behind an expansive desk sat Alexander Reed himself, a man whose reputation for ruthless business acumen was as well known as his aversion to personal attachments. "Miss Bennet," he said without looking up from his documents, "please sit." At 35, Alexander Reed had built his architectural empire from modest beginnings into a global powerhouse. His perfectly tailored suit couldn't hide the tension in his shoulders or the perpetual furrow between his brows. When he finally looked up, his steel-gray eyes appraised her with clinical detachment. "Let's not waste time," he said, sliding a folder across the desk. "These are the terms of our arrangement. I've been told you understand the basics." Olivia's hands trembled slightly as she opened the folder. "I do," she replied, maintaining as much dignity as possible. "A marriage contract for mutual benefit." 3 months ago, Olivia's world had been perfect. At 28, she had established herself as one of Boston's most promising interior designers, working alongside her father in their family business, Bennet Design, which had operated for 3 generations. Their clientele included the city's elite, with projects spanning historic renovations to modern luxury spaces. Her portfolio was growing, and she had been developing her own unique line of sustainable furniture. Then came the financial collapse. A major client's bankruptcy triggered a domino effect, revealing precarious investments her father had made. Suddenly, Bennet Design was facing insolvency, with dozens of employees and their families at risk. Her father's health deteriorated under the stress, leaving Olivia to face the creditors and legal threats alone. "Your family situation is unfortunate," Alexander commented, interrupting her thoughts. "But it presents a solution to my problem as well." Alexander's problem had been explained to her by a mutual acquaintance who had suggested this arrangement. Reed Enterprises was expanding globally, but investors and key international partners were increasingly concerned about Alexander's personal reputation. His cold demeanor and complete lack of family ties made many traditional business partners, particularly in Asia and the Middle East, hesitant to commit to long-term contracts. Her stable marriage would project reliability and continuity, qualities his company desperately needed for the upcoming expansion. "The terms are straightforward," Alexander continued. "We marry, you move into my residence, and we present a united front at all required social and business functions. Your family's debts will be cleared, and Bennet Design will receive emergency funding, followed by legitimate contracts with Reed Enterprises subsidiaries." Olivia flipped through the pages, each one more detailed than the last. "And the duration?" 3 years, after which we divorce amicably, citing irreconcilable differences. You'll receive a settlement sufficient to ensure your family business remains stable." Her eyes scanned the personal clauses: separate bedrooms, no physical relationship, mandatory attendance at specific events, coordinated public appearances, and, most significantly, absolute confidentiality regarding the nature of their arrangement. "The penalties for breach of contract are severe," she noted, her voice barely steady. Alexander's expression remained impassive. "This is a business transaction, Miss Bennet. I treat all my contracts with equal seriousness, and if emotions become involved..." The question slipped out before she could stop herself. A flash of something, perhaps amusement, perhaps warning, crossed his face. They won't. I've never had trouble maintaining professional boundaries, and I trust you're equally capable. Olivia. Close the folder. The weight of her family's legacy pressed down on her shoulders. Her father's health, their employees' livelihoods, 3 generations of work, all hanging in the balance. When would we need to? She hesitated. The wedding would be next week. Small, private, but with enough witnesses to make it convincing. My PR team will handle the narrative. A whirlwind romance, kept private until now. A week. 1 week to say goodbye to her life as she knew it. Do you have questions? Alexander asked, checking his watch. Hundreds, Olivia thought, but instead she asked just one. Why me? Surely there are women with more advantageous connections or social standing. For the first time, Alexander's expression softened marginally. You come from a respected family with a long-standing business. You have no romantic entanglements that might complicate matters. Your design background complements my architectural work, making our connection plausible. And most importantly, you have something genuine at stake, which means you'll be committed to making this work. The clinical assessment stung, but Olivia couldn't fault his logic. She was the perfect candidate for his needs. I'll need 24 hours to consider, she said, standing up. Alexander nodded once. Of course, but the offer expires after that. I have board meetings in Tokyo next month, and I need to present the right image before then. Back in the elevator, Olivia's composure finally cracked. Tears threatened as she leaned against the mirrored wall. What choice did she really have? Her father's doctor had warned that another stress-induced episode could be devastating. The employees, who had been like extended family, were counting on her. The historic Bennett workshop, filled with 3 generations of designs and dreams, would be liquidated without immediate intervention. That evening, Olivia sat in her childhood home's study, surrounded by design sketches and family photographs. Her father Thomas was asleep upstairs, finally resting after weeks of insomnia and anxiety. "What would you do, Dad?" she whispered to a photograph of her parents on their wedding day. Her mother had passed away when Olivia was 16, but her influence remained in every corner of their home. Her smartphone buzzed with a text from her best friend Charlotte. "How did the meeting go? Call me." Olivia couldn't bring herself to call. How could she explain that she was considering a marriage contract to a man who viewed human relationships as business transactions? Instead, she opened her laptop and researched Alexander Reed more thoroughly. His success story was impressive. Orphaned. At 12, scholarship to MIT, worked his way through college at construction sites, started Reed Enterprises at 22 with a single innovative sustainable housing project. Now his company handled billions in development across 5 continents. The personal details were sparse. No serious relationships reported in the press. Parents deceased, no siblings, occasional photos at charity galas, always alone or with business associates. One peculiar detail caught her attention. Despite his massive wealth, he regularly visited the same small diner in South Boston every Sunday morning. At dawn, after a sleepless night, Olivia made her decision. She called the number Alexander had provided. "I accept your terms," she said when he answered, her voice clearer and stronger than she expected. "But I have 3 conditions of my own." There was a pause, then. "I'm listening." "First, my father cannot know this marriage is arranged. His health is fragile, and believing this is real will aid his recovery." "Reasonable," Alexander replied after a moment. "And your other conditions?" "Second, I maintain creative control of any design projects I undertake for Reed Enterprises. My work won't be compromised." "Agreed, provided the designs meet company standards." Olivia took a deep breath. "Finally, when this ends, and it will end, you'll provide referrals and recommendations for Bennett Design based on the actual quality of our work, not our personal arrangement." The silence lasted longer this time. "Those terms are acceptable," Alexander finally said. "My lawyer will add them to the contract. Be at City Hall Friday at noon. Bring 1 witness you trust completely." The line went dead, and Olivia sat frozen, phone still pressed to her ear. In 72 hours she would become Mrs. Alexander Reed, a wife in name only, bound by clauses and subclauses rather than love and commitment. What she couldn't know then was how quickly those carefully crafted boundaries would begin to blur, or that the man she was agreeing to marry was harboring secrets that would soon threaten everything they were building. Charlotte's reaction was predictably explosive when Olivia finally explained the situation. "You're doing what? Liv, this is insane. There has to be another way." "I've explored every other option," Olivia said quietly, watching her friend pace around her apartment. "This saves my family, our employees, everything my parents built. By selling yourself to Boston's iciest bachelor. He's called the architect of isolation in business circles, for heaven's sake." "It's just temporary," Olivia insisted. 3 years. Charlotte stopped pacing to stare at her friend. 3 years of your life, Liv. 3 years you can never get back. What Charlotte didn't say, what Olivia couldn't bear to hear spoken aloud, was that they both knew how deeply Olivia valued authenticity and emotional connection. This contract violated everything she believed about relationships. "Will you stand with me on Friday?" Olivia asked softly. "I need someone who knows the truth." Charlotte's eyes filled with tears. "Of course I will. But I still think you're making a terrible mistake." As Friday approached, Olivia packed her essential belongings. Alexander had informed her that she would be moving into his Beacon Hill townhouse immediately after the ceremony. Her father, weak but improving after being told about her whirlwind romance, helped her select family heirlooms to take to her new home. "I always hoped to see you marry for love like your mother and I did," Thomas Bennett said, holding a sterling silver picture frame that had been a wedding gift to his own parents. "But seeing you so decisive, taking charge of your future, it reminds me of her." Guilt twisted in Olivia's stomach, but she forced a smile. "I'm doing what needs to be done," she said, which wasn't entirely a lie. What she didn't tell him was how her hands shook when she signed the final contract, or how she'd cried herself to sleep every night since accepting Alexander's proposal. Some truths were better left unsaid. The ceremony was brief and clinical, a perfect reflection of the relationship it formalized. City Hall's sterile environment, with its fluorescent lighting and hard wooden benches, served as an appropriate backdrop for the business transaction disguised as a marriage. Olivia wore a simple cream-colored dress, while Alexander appeared in one of his trademark charcoal suits. Charlotte stood as witness alongside Alexander's lawyer, Marcus Whitman, a man whose perpetual frown suggested he'd tasted something unpleasant. No rings were exchanged, a detail Alexander had insisted on, though he did produce a platinum band for Olivia just before they entered the judge's chambers. "For appearances," he'd explained, sliding it across the bench between them. The ring was beautiful but impersonal, clearly selected by an assistant rather than the man himself. When the judge pronounced them husband and wife, Alexander hesitated for a fraction of a second before placing the lightest possible kiss on Olivia's cheek. She caught a fleeting scent of his cologne, sandalwood, and something darker, more complex. "Congratulations," the judge said without enthusiasm, clearly having witnessed too many loveless unions to be fooled by theirs. Outside, Charlotte hugged Olivia fiercely. "Call me any time," she whispered. "Day or night, I mean it." Alexander watched the exchange with detached curiosity, as if observing a cultural ritual he'd read about but never experienced. When the women separated, he checked his watch. "The car is waiting," he said, gesturing toward a sleek black Bentley idling at the curb. "I have a conference call at 2. Marcus handed Olivia a business card. "If you have any questions about the agreement's terms, please contact me directly rather than bothering Mr. Reed." His tone made it clear such questions would be unwelcome. The ride to Alexander's Beacon Hill townhouse passed in silence. Olivia watched Boston's familiar streets slide by, feeling increasingly like she was leaving her real life behind. Alexander spent the entire journey responding to emails on his phone, the rapid clicking of his keyboard, the only sound between them. The townhouse was exactly what she'd expected, architecturally stunning, meticulously designed, and utterly devoid of warmth. High ceilings, original crown molding, and restored hardwood floors spoke to the building's historical significance, while the furnishings reflected Alexander's minimalist aesthetic. Everything was in shades of white, grey and black, with occasional chrome accents. The effect was more gallery than home. "Your belongings arrived this morning," Alexander said, finally putting away his phone as they entered. "Mrs. Winters organized everything. She manages the household and comes in weekdays from 8 to 6. "I see," Olivia replied, trying to imagine living in this pristine, impersonal space. "Your suite is on the second floor, east side. Mine is on the west. We share the central study." He gestured toward a sweeping staircase. "I've had keycards. Programmed for you, building, house, garage, and office. Your driver starts Monday." "My driver?" Olivia hadn't expected such extravagance. Alexander's expression remained impassive. "We need to maintain appearances. The press will be watching now that the announcement has been made. Speaking of which," he handed her a leather portfolio. "Our schedule for the next month. PR has arranged strategic appearances, interviews, and events. Everything is coordinated with your existing professional commitments." Olivia flipped through the meticulously organized calendar, a knot forming in her stomach at how thoroughly her life had been planned without her input. "Don't I get any say in this?" "You're welcome to suggest modifications, but the framework needs to remain intact. We're crafting a narrative, Olivia. Consistency is key." The use of her first name startled her. Until now, he'd called her Miss Bennett exclusively. "I should check on my father," she said, pulling out her phone. Alexander nodded. "Of course. I'll be in my office until 7, then I have dinner with investors. Don't wait up." And just like that, she was alone in her new home, surrounded by perfection that felt as cold as a museum after hours. The East Suite exceeded her expectations. Clearly, someone had researched her preferences. The space featured warm earth tones, natural fabrics, and even a few carefully selected art pieces, similar to those she'd had in her own apartment. A separate sitting room had been converted into a design studio, complete with drafting table, materials library, and top-of-the-line computer equipment. On the desk sat a handwritten note. "Welcome, Mrs. Reed. Please let me know if you require any adjustments to your spaces. Mrs. Winters." The formal address, Mrs. Reed, sent a shiver through Olivia. She wasn't Mrs. Reed. She was still Olivia Bennett, just temporarily playing a role for which she felt woefully unprepared. That first week established their routine. Alexander departed by 7 each morning, returning rarely before 8 at night. They saw each other in passing, exchanging formal pleasantries when they did. Their interactions were choreographed around his schedule, with Mrs. Winters serving as an efficient intermediary, leaving notes about dinner plans and social obligations. The press coverage was immediate and intense. "Boston's most eligible bachelor weds in secret ceremony" screamed one headline. "Hauer couple. Architecture meets design" proclaimed another, alongside a candid photo of them leaving his office building together. The narrative constructed by Alexander's PR team, that they'd met on a collaborative project, fallen in love quickly, and married privately, was repeated verbatim across multiple outlets. Olivia's father was delighted, calling daily for updates on her romantic new chapter. The fiction was exhausting to maintain, but seeing how the financial pressure had lifted from his shoulders made the deception worthwhile. Bennett Design was already receiving new contracts, and their employees' jobs were secure. On their 9th day of marriage, Alexander appeared in the kitchen while Olivia was making tea, an unprecedented break in routine. "I need you to attend a dinner tomorrow night," he said without preamble. "Japanese delegation, very traditional. They've specifically requested you be present." Olivia stirred honey into her tea. "It's already on my calendar. Mrs. Winters arranged for a stylist to bring options this afternoon." Alexander nodded, but didn't leave. Instead, he watched her with the same analytical gaze he applied to architectural problems. "You're adapting well," he observed after a moment. "Did you expect otherwise?" "People generally find change more difficult than they anticipate." She took a sip of tea before responding. "I made a commitment. I honor my commitments." "As do I." He hesitated, then added, "The investors were impressed with your redesigned proposal for the Singapore hotel lobby." The praise caught her off guard. She'd spent hours refining that proposal, knowing it would be her first professional contribution to Reed Enterprises. "Thank you." Another awkward silence stretched between them before Alexander cleared his throat. "I'll be late tonight. Board meeting." And then he was gone again, leaving Olivia to wonder about the strange interaction. Had that been his version of an olive branch, or merely a business assessment of her performance thus far? The Japanese dinner proved to be a turning point. Dressed in an elegant burgundy gown, selected to complement Alexander's formal attire, Olivia found herself seated beside Mrs. Tanaka, wife of the delegation's leader. The older woman spoke limited English, but made clear her interest in Olivia's background. "How you meet husband?" she asked directly as the first course was served. Olivia recited the prepared story, trying to infuse it with warmth. Alexander, seated across the table, watched her performance with subtle approval. "Love at first sight?" Mrs. Tanaka pressed. "Not exactly," Olivia replied carefully. "We respected each other professionally first. The personal connection came later." Mrs. Tanaka nodded sagely. "Best marriages built on respect. Romance fades. Respect remains." Later in the evening, Mrs. Tanaka gestured toward Alexander, who was deep in conversation with her husband. "Your husband, very serious man, but watches you always." Startled, Olivia glanced over to find Alexander's gaze indeed flicking toward her periodically, even as he discussed architectural specifications. When their eyes met briefly, something unreadable passed across his face before he returned his attention to Mr. Tanaka. The night ended with a breakthrough deal for Reed Enterprises' expansion into the Japanese market. In the car returning home, Alexander broke their customary silence. "You handled Mrs. Tanaka perfectly," he said. "She's known for testing newcomers. Her approval carries significant weight with her husband." Olivia smoothed her dress absently. "She's perceptive." "Yes," Alexander seemed to hesitate. "What did she say to make you look at me during dessert?" "She said you were watching me," Olivia admitted, curious about his reaction. Alexander's expression didn't change, but his knuckles whitened slightly as his grip on his phone tightened. Maintaining appropriate couple dynamics is part of the presentation. "Of course," Olivia replied, turning to look out the window. "Always business, never anything more." 2 days later, Olivia received an urgent call from her father's caregiver. Thomas had experienced a minor fall and was asking for her. She rushed to his home, finding him bruised but relatively unharmed. "I'm fine, really," he insisted as she fussed over him. "Just clumsy. Tell me about married life instead." She fabricated small details. Breakfast together, weekend plans, shared interests discovered. The lies came more easily now, a realization that disturbed her deeply. "He's a lucky man," Thomas said, patting her hand. "I was worried when it happened so quickly. But seeing you now, you're glowing, sweetie." Any response was interrupted by the doorbell. To Olivia's shock, Alexander himself stood on the threshold, a basket of gourmet food items in hand. "Thomas," he greeted her father warmly, more warmly than Olivia had ever heard him speak. "I came as soon as I heard. How are you feeling?" As the men talked, Olivia observed Alexander with growing confusion. He was charming, attentive, asking insightful questions about her father's health and interests. This version of Alexander, Reed, the caring son-in-law, was entirely foreign to her. "You didn't have to come," she said quietly as they left 2 hours later. "Yes, I did." Alexander opened the car door for her. "Your father's health was a condition in our agreement. Besides, I've rearranged meetings for less important matters." The unexpected visit shifted something in their dynamic. That evening, they ate dinner, together for the first time, with Alexander asking about her father's recovery and offering to arrange for additional in-home care. "Why?" Olivia finally asked. "This goes beyond our contract." Alexander considered her question with the seriousness he seemed to apply to everything. "I understand family obligation," he said eventually. "My parents died when I was young, but before that my mother had a long illness. I remember what it's like to care for someone." It was the most personal information he'd volunteered since they met, and Olivia found herself wanting to know more. I'm sorry about your parents." He nodded once, accepting her sympathy without elaboration. Then, returning to business mode, "I've moved tomorrow's meetings to accommodate a site visit. We'll need to leave by 7. Just like that, the moment of connection was over. But that night, Olivia found herself lying awake, reassessing her understanding of the man whose last name she now shared. What other layers existed beneath that carefully constructed exterior? And why did she suddenly want to discover them? The following weeks established a new pattern. They maintained their separate lives but began sharing occasional meals. Alexander remained intensely private, but small details emerged. His preference for strong coffee, his habit of reading historical biographies, his unexpected appreciation for classical music. Professionally, they developed a rhythm, with Olivia's design sensibilities complementing Alexander's architectural vision in ways that impressed both clients and colleagues. Their working relationship was natural, almost intuitive, leading to late nights in the study reviewing plans and proposals together. During one such session, Alexander abruptly asked, "Are you happy, Olivia?" She looked up from the blueprints, spread across the table, startled by the personal question. "Happy? I don't think that was part of our agreement." "Nevertheless," he persisted, "are you?" Olivia considered the question seriously. "I'm satisfied with our arrangement. Bennett Design is thriving again. My father is doing better. Professionally, I'm doing meaningful work." "That's not what I asked." She met his gaze directly. "Happiness requires authenticity, Alexander. This," she gestured between them, "whatever this is, it isn't authentic." Something flickered in his eyes, disappointment perhaps, or recognition. Before he could respond, his phone rang. He checked the screen and immediately stiffened. "I need to take this," he said, standing abruptly. "We'll continue tomorrow." He spoke in hushed tones as he left the room, but Olivia caught fragments that made little sense. "Stable condition, and no changes to the treatment plan, and I'll visit Thursday as usual." The mystery of that call, and Alexander's visceral reaction to it, would soon lead Olivia to a discovery that would fundamentally alter her understanding of the man she had married in name only. The discovery happened by accident. 3 months into their arranged marriage, Olivia was searching for a misplaced design portfolio in Alexander's home office, a space she rarely entered without him present. As she reached for a folder on his immaculately organized desk, she knocked over a leather planner. It fell open to reveal a handwritten schedule with a recurring Thursday afternoon appointment, simply labeled Riverside. Any other notation might not have caught her attention, but she had noticed how Alexander invariably blocked off Thursday afternoons, refusing even the most important meetings during that time slot. He never explained his absence, and she had respected his privacy, assuming it was related to business too confidential to discuss. Curiosity, and something deeper, something she wasn't ready to name, prompted her to check previous weeks. The pattern was consistent. Every Thursday from 2 to 5 p.m., Riverside. She carefully replaced the planner exactly as she'd found it, the portfolio forgotten. That night at dinner, now a semi-regular occurrence, she studied Alexander more carefully, noting the subtle shadows under his eyes and the slight tension in his shoulders that seemed most pronounced on Thursdays. "Busy day tomorrow?" she asked casually, passing him the salt. Alexander glanced up, his expression neutral. "The usual meetings. The Singapore project needs attention before the weekend deadline." No mention of Riverside, whatever it was. Olivia nodded and changed the subject, but her mind was working furiously. This man she'd married, this stranger who was no longer quite a stranger, was keeping secrets. Given the increasingly comfortable rhythm they'd established over the past months, his continued secretiveness stung more than she wanted to admit. The next morning, Olivia made a decision she knew violated the spirit, if not the letter, of their agreement. After Alexander left for work, she called Charlotte. "I need a favor," she said without preamble. "Can you pick me up at 2 and bring something inconspicuous to wear?" Charlotte, to her credit, asked no questions until they were in her modest sedan, Olivia disguised in casual clothes, sunglasses, and one of Charlotte's baseball caps. "Please tell me we're not stalking your fake husband," Charlotte said as Olivia directed her to Reed Enterprises' gleaming headquarters. "Not stalking," Olivia insisted. "Just verifying some information." Charlotte raised an eyebrow but said nothing as they parked across from the building's main entrance. At precisely 1:55 p.m., Alexander emerged, declining his waiting car and instead walking briskly toward the nearest T-station. "Now we're definitely stalking him," Charlotte muttered as they followed at a distance. "Is this really necessary? Why not just ask the man where he goes?" Olivia's hands fidgeted in her lap. "Because he wouldn't tell me. And because—" She hesitated. "I need to know if what we're building is based on more lies than I signed up for." Alexander took the Green Line to Riverside, just as Olivia had suspected from the planner notation. From the station, he walked 3 blocks to a quiet, tree-lined street and entered a nondescript building with a discreet sign, Riverside Memory Care Center. "A nursing home?" Charlotte whispered as they watched from across the street. "Who does he know here?" "I have no idea," Olivia admitted, her theories about secret business dealings or even another family suddenly evaporating. They waited, Charlotte, periodically questioning the ethics of their surveillance, while Olivia wrestled with her own conflicting emotions. After nearly 2 hours, Alexander emerged, his normally perfect posture slightly slumped, his expression more open and vulnerable than Olivia had ever seen it. "We should go," Olivia said suddenly, an unexpected wave of guilt washing over her. This moment of evident pain seemed too private to witness uninvited. Back in Charlotte's car, her friend finally broke the silence. "Are you going to tell me what that was about?" "I don't know," Olivia confessed, "but I'm going to find out." That evening, Olivia prepared Alexander's favorite meal, a detail she'd learned through careful observation rather than conversation. When he arrived home, his mask of composure firmly back in place, she greeted him with a glass of the Bordeaux he favored. "What's for the occasion?" he asked, loosening his tie as he accepted the wine. "I thought we could talk," she said, her heart racing. "Really talk." Alexander's expression remained guarded. "About?" Taking a deep breath, Olivia decided on directness. "About Riverside Memory Care Center." The change was instantaneous. His posture stiffened, his expression hardened, and the slight warmth that had been developing between them over shared meals and late-night work sessions vanished completely. "You followed me," he stated flatly. "Yes," she admitted, refusing to look away from his accusing gaze. "I'm sorry for the invasion of privacy, but not for wanting to understand the man I'm married to, even if it's just on paper." Alexander set down his wine glass with deliberate care. "My personal matters are not included in our contract." "Maybe they should be," Olivia countered. "We're living together, working together, presenting ourselves as partners to the world. How long did you think you could keep significant parts of your life completely separate?" For a moment, she thought he would walk away, end the conversation, and retreat behind his walls instead. After a long silence, he exhaled slowly. "My mother," he said finally, his voice uncharacteristically quiet. "She's been at Riverside for 7 years, early-onset Alzheimer's." The revelation stunned Olivia. In all the research she'd done on Alexander Reed before agreeing to marry him, there had never been any mention of a living parent. "But everything I read said your parents were deceased." "A necessary fiction," he replied, running a hand through his normally immaculate hair. "The business world isn't kind to perceived weaknesses. A dying mother who no longer recognizes her son doesn't project the image of control investors expect." Olivia processed this information, pieces falling into place. His understanding of her concern for her father, his unexpected warmth when visiting Thomas, those mysterious phone calls. "Does anyone else know?" she asked gently. "Marcus handles the legal and financial arrangements. Mrs. Winters arranges flowers to be delivered weekly." Alexander's expression had shifted to something Olivia couldn't quite read, not vulnerability exactly, but a weariness that suggested the weight of long-held secrets. "No one else." "Until me," Olivia said softly. Alexander met her gaze. Until you. The moment stretched between them, heavy with unspoken implications. Then Alexander did something completely unexpected. He continued talking. "She was brilliant," he said, moving to the window that overlooked Boston Harbor. Architectural engineer, Massachusetts Institute of Technology graduate, broke barriers in a male-dominated field. She raised me alone after my father left when I was 4, taught me everything about structural integrity, about building things. That last. Olivia remained silent, afraid any interruption might break this rare moment of openness. "The diagnosis came when I was 25, he continued. "Just as Reed Enterprises was gaining traction. She made me promise 2 things: that I would never let her condition become public knowledge that might damage the company she'd helped me build, and that I would never place her in a facility where she'd be treated as less than the brilliant woman she was." "That's why you visit every Thursday," Olivia realized, "even though she may not recognize you anymore." Alexander's smile held no joy. "She hasn't known me for 3 years now. Some days she thinks I'm her brother, other days a complete stranger. But I made a promise." Olivia moved to stand beside him at the window, careful to maintain a respectful distance. "Thank you for telling me." "You didn't leave me much choice," he replied, but the edge in his voice had softened. "Would you—" Olivia hesitated, uncertain of boundaries in this new territory. "Would you like me to go with you sometime?" The question clearly surprised him. He studied her face with the intensity she'd grown accustomed to, searching for hidden motives. "Why would you want to do that?" Olivia considered her answer carefully. "Because no one should carry burdens alone, even strong people, especially strong people. Even if it's just for appearance's sake, we're in this together now." Something shifted in Alexander's expression, a barely perceptible softening around his eyes. "I'll consider it," he said finally, which from him felt like a monumental concession. That night marked a turning point. Though Alexander retreated to his own rooms as always, the invisible wall between them had developed a small but significant crack. The following weeks brought subtle but meaningful changes. Alexander began sharing occasional stories about his mother, her accomplishments, her influence on his work, her sharp humor before the disease took hold. Olivia, in turn, spoke more openly about losing her own mother as a teenager, and how that loss had shaped her approach to design. Their marriage remained a business arrangement, but the coldness that had characterized their early interactions gradually warmed into something resembling companionship. They still maintained separate bedrooms, still adhered to the contract's boundaries, but their conversations extended beyond work and social obligations. At the beginning of their 4th month together, Alexander surprised Olivia by inviting her to accompany him to Riverside. "Are you sure?" she asked, touched by the invitation but aware of how significant it was for him to share this private part of his life. "She's having one of her better weeks," he replied, adjusting his cufflinks, a nervous gesture Olivia had begun to recognize. "And it's time you met her." The Riverside Memory Care Center was nothing like Olivia had imagined. Rather than the clinical, antiseptic environment she'd expected, it resembled a comfortable country hotel with warm lighting, elegant furnishings, and artwork lining the hallways. The staff greeted Alexander by name, with a familiarity that spoke of long acquaintance. A nurse named Sarah guided them to a sun-filled sitting room where an elegant older woman sat by the window, her silver hair neatly styled, her posture perfect. "Elizabeth," Sarah said gently, "your son is here to see you. And he's brought someone special today." Elizabeth Reed turned, her piercing grey eyes so like her son's, focusing on them with unexpected clarity. "Alexander," she said, her voice stronger than Olivia had anticipated. Then those penetrating eyes shifted to Olivia. "And who might this be?" Alexander placed a gentle hand on Olivia's back, the first time he had touched her outside of their choreographed public appearances. "Mother, this is Olivia Bennett, my wife." The introduction hung in the air, weighted with all the complexities of their arrangement. Elizabeth's expression remained neutral as she studied Olivia. "Bennett," she repeated, "the design family." Olivia stepped forward, extending her hand. "Yes, ma'am, it's a pleasure to meet you." Elizabeth accepted the handshake, her grip surprisingly firm. "Sit, both of you. Alexander, you look tired. Is he working too hard, Olivia?" The normalcy of the question, so maternal, so ordinary, caught Olivia off guard. "Always," she answered truthfully, "but he loves what he does." For the next hour, Elizabeth alternated between perfect lucidity and confused tangents. She spoke of architectural innovations from decades past, as if they were current events, asked Alexander about projects he had completed years ago, and occasionally addressed Olivia by another name, Catherine. During one of these moments, Alexander quietly explained, "Catherine was my mother's research assistant before her diagnosis." They were close. Throughout the visit, Olivia watched Alexander transform. The rigid businessman who controlled every interaction with calculated precision became a patient, gentle son who answered the same questions multiple times without a hint of frustration, who held his mother's hand when she became agitated, who carried photographs to remind her of moments she had forgotten. As they were preparing to leave, Elizabeth suddenly fixed Olivia with a stare of complete clarity. "He doesn't let people in easily," she said, her voice momentarily free of confusion. "Never has, not since his father left. Be patient with him." Tears pricked at Olivia's eyes. "I will," she promised, though she wasn't sure if Elizabeth would remember the conversation minutes later. On the drive home, Alexander was quieter than usual, his gaze fixed on the passing scenery. Finally, as they approached Beacon Hill, he spoke. "Thank you for coming today. She liked you." Olivia turned to him, choosing her words carefully. "She's remarkable. I see so much of her in you. Her intelligence, her precision, her dignity." Alexander's hands tightened on the steering wheel. "And her failing mind? Do you see that in me too? The doctors say there's a genetic component." The vulnerability in the question stunned her. "Is that why you've always kept people at a distance? Fear of your mother's condition becoming your own?" His silence was answer enough. "Alexander," she said softly, "if that happens, decades from now, you won't face it alone." He glanced at her, surprise evident in his expression. "Our contract will be long expired by then." The reminder of their arrangement's temporary nature stung more than Olivia expected. "Then you'll have someone else by your side, someone real." Alexander returned his gaze to the road. "That's unlikely. This arrangement with you is the closest I've allowed anyone in years." The admission hung between them, neither able to fully address its implications or the growing complexity of feelings beneath their contractual facade. The following week brought a new complication. Olivia returned from a meeting with Bennett Design's project managers to find an elegant woman waiting in their living room. Mrs. Winters introduced her as Judith Blackwell, federal judge and longtime family friend of the Reeds. "Olivia," Judith said warmly, though her sharp eyes missed nothing as she assessed the younger woman. "I've been looking forward to meeting Alexander's wife. He's been surprisingly secretive about you." Something in her tone set alarm bells ringing in Olivia's mind. This wasn't a social call. "Judge Blackwell is handling Mother's conservatorship review," Alexander explained as he entered the room, his professional mask firmly in place. "She's been kind enough to manage the legal aspects of her care since the beginning." Judith's smile remained pleasant, but her questions over tea were pointed. How they'd met, their courtship, Olivia's relationship with Elizabeth. Each answer felt like navigating a legal deposition rather than friendly conversation. As Judith was leaving, she paused in the hallway. "One more thing," she said casually. "I'll need both of you to provide formal statements for the court regarding Elizabeth's ongoing care arrangements, separately, of course, as is standard procedure." After she'd gone, Olivia turned to Alexander in alarm. "What was that about?" His expression was grim. "She suspects our marriage isn't genuine. Judith has known me since childhood. She knows I've never pursued serious relationships. Why would that matter for your mother's care?" "Because," Alexander explained, pacing the room, "the conservatorship includes specific provisions about family integrity and continuity of care. If our marriage is exposed as fraudulent, it could trigger a complete review of all arrangements. potentially moving my mother to a state-appointed facility. The stakes suddenly became clear. This wasn't just about business reputation or social appearances anymore. Elizabeth Reed's quality of life hung in the balance. "Then we'll convince her," Olivia said firmly. "We'll be the most devoted couple Judge Blackwell has ever seen." Alexander stopped pacing to study her. "You understand what that means? We'll need to be more convincing than just appearing at functions together. She'll be watching for genuine intimacy, shared history, the kind of knowledge that only comes from real relationships." "Then we'd better start building that knowledge," Olivia replied, her heart racing at the implications. "Starting now." That night they stayed up until dawn, sitting across from each other in the study, trading life stories, preferences, fears and dreams, constructing the foundation of intimacy their charade now required. Olivia learned that Alexander harbored a secret passion for sailing, that he had broken his arm at 7 trying to build a treehouse, that he preferred winter to summer because the architecture of bare trees against the sky reveals structural truths hidden by leaves. In turn, she shared her childhood ambition to become a ballerina before discovering design, her collection of vintage architectural journals inherited from her grandfather, her habit of sketching design ideas on restaurant napkins. As dawn, light filtered through the windows, Alexander regarded her with something like wonder. "You're actually quite remarkable, Olivia Bennett," he said quietly. "In another context, I might have pursued you properly." The admission sent an unexpected warmth through her. "And in another context, I might have let you," she replied, surprising herself with her honesty. They faced Judge Blackwell's separate interviews the following week with carefully constructed authenticity. Their stories aligned perfectly, filled with the intimate details they'd exchanged during their marathon night of truth-telling. What neither expected was how that manufactured closeness would bleed into their daily reality. Alexander began asking about her day with genuine interest. Olivia found herself picking up architecture magazines that featured topics he'd mentioned. They started sharing meals more regularly, their conversations extending beyond what was necessary for their pretense. One evening, as they worked side by side in the study, Alexander showed her preliminary designs for a new project, a rehabilitation center for patients with neurodegenerative conditions. "This is inspired by your mother, isn't it?" Olivia asked, studying the innovative floor plan that subtly guided residents without making them feel confined. Alexander nodded. "I've been thinking about it for years, but never moved forward. It felt too personal." "It's beautiful," she said, sincerely. "The way you've integrated nature with these graduated spatial transitions, patients would maintain dignity while still being secure." "That's exactly what I'm trying to achieve," he said, surprised by her immediate understanding. "Would you—" He hesitated. "Would you consider collaborating on the interior concepts? Your work at the Chen Museum showed remarkable sensitivity to how people move through therapeutic spaces." The request, professional yet deeply personal, touched her. "I'd be honored," she replied. As they worked together on the rehabilitation center project, something fundamental shifted between them. Their professional symbiosis evolved into a deeper connection, their conversations extending into late nights, their carefully maintained physical distance gradually diminishing. 1. Rainy Sunday, they found themselves discussing childhood books in front of the fireplace, sharing a bottle of wine. When Olivia mentioned her favorite novel, Alexander rose and retrieved a well-worn copy from his private library, the same edition she had treasured. "You never mentioned you'd read it," she said, accepting the book with reverence. "There's still a great deal we don't know about each other," he replied, his voice lower than usual. When he sat down again, he chose the space beside her on the sofa rather than his usual separate chair. The awareness between them had been building for weeks, a current of unacknowledged tension that their contract expressly forbade. Yet as the firelight played across his features, softening the angles of his face, Olivia found herself wondering what would happen if she simply leaned forward and— The doorbell shattered the moment. Mrs. Winters had long since gone home, so Alexander went to answer it himself. Olivia remained by the fire, her heart racing with possibilities and fears. The voices in the hallway grew heated, Alexander's measured tones countered by a woman's insistent, unfamiliar voice. Finally, they entered the study together. "Olivia," Alexander said stiffly, "this is Diana Maxwell. She's a journalist working on a profile of Reed Enterprises." The blonde woman's smile didn't reach her calculating eyes. "Actually, I'm working on something much more interesting now. A story about how Boston's most eligible bachelor engineered a marriage of convenience to rescue a failing design company and improve his corporate image." The accusation hung in the air like a live grenade. Alexander's expression revealed nothing, but Olivia felt the ground shifting beneath her feet. Their carefully constructed world was about to shatter, and with it, everything they had unexpectedly begun to build together. "That's quite an accusation, Miss Maxwell," Alexander said, his voice betraying none of the tension Olivia could see in the rigid set of his shoulders, "especially without evidence." Diana Maxwell settled uninvited into an armchair, her predatory smile widening. "Oh, I have evidence. Anonymous sources close to Reed Enterprises, unusual financial transfers to Bennett Design, and the rather convenient timing of your sudden romance." Olivia's mind raced. Their contract specifically prohibited disclosure. Any leak must have come from someone with inside knowledge. Only Marcus Whitman and Charlotte knew the full truth. "You're trespassing on private property and making defamatory accusations," Alexander continued calmly. "I suggest you leave before I call security." Diana remained unruffled. "I'll go, but this story is breaking with or without your comment. I'm offering a courtesy chance to provide your side." She placed a business card on the coffee table. "You have until tomorrow noon." After she left, the silence between them stretched painfully. Olivia finally broke it. Could she really know? Or is she fishing? Alexander paced the room, his controlled facade cracking for the first time since she'd known him. Someone talked. The timing is too precise right after Judge Blackwell's investigation began. "This isn't coincidence." "Charlotte wouldn't betray me," Olivia insisted. "She's been my friend since college." "And Marcus has been my attorney for a decade," Alexander countered, running a hand through his hair. "Neither makes sense, yet here we are." The implications were staggering. If the story broke, everything would collapse. The rescue of Bennett Design, Alexander's business expansion, Elizabeth's care arrangements, and whatever undefined thing had been growing between them. "What do we do?" Olivia asked, her voice barely steady. Alexander's expression hardened into decisive focus. "We counterattack. Marcus will file for an emergency injunction against publication based on unfounded allegations. Meanwhile, we accelerate our public appearances, looking more genuinely in love than ever." "And if that fails?" Olivia pressed. His eyes met hers, their usual steel now clouded with something close to regret. "Then we execute the contract's contingency clauses. You'll receive the promised settlement, Bennett Design will retain its current contracts, and we'll issue a statement citing personal differences." The clinical assessment of their potential separation hit Olivia with unexpected force. 6 months ago, such an outcome would have represented freedom from an arrangement entered into from desperation. Now it felt like losing something precious she hadn't admitted to wanting. The next morning brought fresh complications. While Alexander worked with Marcus on legal countermeasures, Olivia received an urgent call from her father. "Livy," Thomas Bennett's voice trembled with agitation, "why didn't you tell me about the investigation?" Her blood ran cold. "What investigation, Dad?" "Some reporter called Diana something, asking about the sudden partnership between Bennett Design and Reed Enterprises, suggesting it was connected to your marriage in some improper way." His breath caught painfully. "Tell me what's going on, sweetheart." Olivia closed her eyes, fighting panic. Diana Maxwell was casting a wide net, approaching family members in hopes of catching inconsistencies. Worse, the stress could trigger another episode for her father. "It's nothing, Dad," she soothed, the lie bitter on her tongue. "Just a journalist trying to create controversy where none exists. Alexander and I are fine." The business partnership is legitimate and separate from our personal relationship. After calming her father, Olivia called Charlotte in a fury. Did you talk to a reporter named Diana Maxwell? What? No, what's happening? Olivia quickly explained the situation. Charlotte's outrage seemed genuine, but doubt had taken root. If not Charlotte or Marcus, who could have leaked their secret? That evening, Alexander returned with grim news. The injunction was denied. The judge ruled that Maxwell's allegations constitute legitimate journalistic inquiry, not defamation. So the story runs tomorrow, Olivia said flatly. Most likely. Alexander loosened his tie, a gesture that had become familiar to her over their months together. We should prepare statements. Olivia watched him, this man who had become so much more than the cold businessman she'd first met, methodically, planning for the collapse of their shared life. Something inside her rebelled against the inevitability of it. What if we told the truth ourselves, she suggested suddenly, on our terms, before she can twist it? Alexander stilled. That would violate our contract. I don't care about the contract anymore. The words burst from her with surprising vehemence. We entered into this arrangement for specific reasons, to save my family's business, to support your corporate expansion. We've accomplished both. Maybe it's time to acknowledge what this really was, and what it must become. The unspoken question hung between them. What had their relationship become? Neither had dared define the subtle shift from business arrangement to something more complex, more real. Alexander's expression softened fractionally. What are you suggesting? A press conference, tomorrow morning, before Maxwell's story breaks. We admit the marriage began as a business arrangement, but frame it as two people who found unexpected common ground through shared values and professional respect. A strategic disclosure, he mused, the architectural part of his mind clearly appreciating the structural elegance of the solution. Exactly, Olivia pressed. We control the narrative. We acknowledge the unconventional beginning, but emphasize what's genuine now, our professional collaboration, our mutual support, our... She hesitated. Our friendship. The word felt inadequate, but she couldn't bring herself to suggest anything more presumptuous. Alexander considered the proposal with characteristic thoroughness. It's risky. We'd face public scrutiny, potential business fallout. Less damaging than having the truth exposed by a hostile journalist, Olivia countered. At least this way we maintain some dignity and control. As they debated options late into the night, an unexpected visitor arrived. Judge Judith Blackwell, her expression grave. I've just received a concerning call, she announced without preamble. A Ms. Maxwell requesting comment on your marriage, for a story suggesting it's fraudulent. Alexander's composure never wavered. Judith, you know how the press operates. They'll manufacture controversy for clicks. The judge's penetrating gaze moved between them. Ordinarily, I'd agree, but combined with certain irregularities in my recent interviews with you both, I'm troubled. If this marriage is indeed a sham, Alexander, it constitutes fraud, with serious implications for your mother's care arrangements. Olivia stepped forward, suddenly clear about what needed to be done. Judge Blackwell, may I speak candidly? Both Alexander and the judge looked surprised, but Judith nodded. Our marriage began unconventionally, Olivia admitted, ignoring Alexander's warning glance. We married quickly, after knowing each other primarily. In professional contexts, many people do. It wasn't a confession of fraud, but the acknowledgement of a partial truth created space for what she said next, which was entirely honest. What neither of us expected was how working together, living together, facing challenges together would change us. Alexander is a deeply private person, which makes him seem cold to those who don't really know him. I've had the privilege of seeing beyond that facade, to the son who visits his mother faithfully, even when she no longer recognizes him, to the visionary architect whose latest project aims to give dignity to patients like Elizabeth. Her voice grew stronger as she continued, no longer certain if she was trying to convince the judge or Alexander himself. Whatever brought us together initially, what matters is who we are to each other now. I understand him in ways I never expected to, and he challenges me to be better, as a designer, as a daughter, as a human being. The room fell silent as Olivia finished. Judge Blackwell studied her intently before turning to Alexander. "And you, Alexander, what is this woman to you?" Alexander's gaze never left Olivia as he answered, "Everything I never knew I needed." The simple declaration, spoken in his characteristic precise manner, carried more weight than any flowery profession could have. Judge Blackwell's stern expression softened slightly. "Well, that wasn't the answer I expected from the boy who built walls better than he built relationships." She gathered her coat. "I'll reserve judgment on this matter pending observation. But Alexander, your mother asked about Olivia today by name. It was a moment of remarkable clarity." After she left, Alexander turned to Olivia, his expression more open than she'd ever seen it. "Did you mean what you said?" "Every word," she admitted, no longer hiding from the truth. "Did you?" Instead of answering directly, he moved toward her with deliberate steps. "The contract specifically prohibits physical involvement," he said quietly. Section 3, paragraph 2. Olivia's heart raced. "Are you always so rule-bound, Alexander Reed?" "Always," he murmured, now standing close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from him. "Except, perhaps, tonight." When his lips finally met hers, Olivia understood with perfect clarity that some contracts are made to be broken. The press conference the next morning sent shockwaves through Boston's business and social circles. Standing together at Reed Enterprises headquarters, Alexander and Olivia presented a united front as they addressed the rumors head-on. "Our relationship began unconventionally," Alexander acknowledged to the assembled reporters. "We married quickly after a primarily professional acquaintance, which has led to speculation about our motivations." Olivia took over seamlessly. "What matters isn't how relationships begin, but how they evolve. We've built something neither of us anticipated, a partnership based on mutual respect, shared values, and genuine care." Diana Maxwell pushed to the front of the crowd. "Isn't it true that Bennett Design was facing bankruptcy before your convenient marriage, and that Reed Enterprises needed a more family-friendly image for Asian expansion?" Alexander met her hostile gaze calmly. "Bennett Design faced challenges, as many businesses did during that economic downturn. And yes, some international partners value family connections. Neither fact diminishes what exists between us." "So you deny any contractual arrangement?" Maxwell pressed. Olivia stepped forward, her voice steady. "The only contract that matters is the one we made before witnesses at City Hall, for better or worse, in business and in life." Not a lie, but not the complete truth either. A diplomatic answer that acknowledged their complex reality while protecting their privacy. The press conference neutralized Maxwell's exposé, transforming her planned scandal into a human interest story about an unconventional romance between two professionals. Judge Blackwell, watching the broadcast from her chambers, smiled faintly and closed Elizabeth Reed's file. The real conversation happened that night, after the cameras were gone, and they were alone in the townhouse that had become their home. "We need to renegotiate our arrangement," Alexander said, his professional tone belied by the warmth in his eyes. Olivia raised an eyebrow. "I believe we've already violated several key provisions. Hence the need for new terms." He took her hands in his. "I propose we eliminate all clauses restricting personal involvement, remove the predetermined end date, and add provisions for ongoing mutual support, both professional and personal." "That sounds suspiciously like actual marriage," Olivia observed, trying to hide her smile. "It does, doesn't it?" Alexander acknowledged. "Though I should warn you, I'm told I'm difficult, how to live with, excessively ordered, obsessively punctual, and emotionally reserved." "I'd noticed," Olivia replied dryly. "And I'm creatively chaotic, occasionally impulsive, and emotionally expressive. Perhaps that's why we work." Alexander's expression grew serious. "When I drafted our original contract, I saw it as a business necessity, a means to an end. I never expected you, Olivia Bennett. I never expected to want more than what was on paper. And now?" she asked softly. Now I want everything that isn't in the contract. The messiness, the uncertainty, the risk of loving someone who might not always love you back. His voice, usually so controlled, held a new vulnerability. I want a real marriage, not a strategic alliance. Olivia reached up to touch his face, this complex man who had become so dear to her. I think we're already there, Alexander. The papers just need to catch up with reality. 6 months later, another small ceremony took place, not at City Hall but in the gardens of Riverside Memory Care Center. Elizabeth Reed, experiencing a remarkable period of clarity, watched with tears in her eyes as her son and Olivia renewed vows that had begun as business but transformed into love. Charlotte, serving again as witness, whispered to Olivia during the reception, "I told you it was a terrible mistake to marry him. Clearly I was wrong." Judge Blackwell, officially presiding, signed the reaffirmation certificate with satisfaction. Sometimes, she remarked to no one in particular, the most solid foundations are built on ground that initially seemed unstable. In the years that followed, Reed Bennett Designs became a leading force in therapeutic architecture, with projects spanning continents. The Rehabilitation Center, inspired by Elizabeth's condition, won international acclaim for its innovative approach to memory care. Thomas Bennett fully recovered, taking pride in how his daughter had not only saved their family legacy, but expanded it in directions he'd never imagined. The employees whose livelihoods had once hung in the balance now headed specialized divisions within the merged company. And on quiet Thursday afternoons, Alexander and Olivia still visited Riverside together, reading to Elizabeth even when she no longer recognized them, honoring the promise that had unexpectedly brought them together. The marriage that began with signatures on a contract grew into something no document could contain, proof that sometimes the most binding agreements are the ones never written down at all. The best contracts, Alexander often reflected, holding Olivia close in the home they had redesigned together, are the ones that become obsolete because reality has surpassed all initial expectations. Olivia couldn't help but agree. Their carefully negotiated arrangement had given way to something far more valuable, a life without clauses, without conditions, without end dates, a life without contract. Dear listeners, we hope you've been captivated by Alexander and Olivia's journey from business arrangement to genuine love. For more emotionally engaging stories that explore the complexities of relationships, we've created a special playlist you can find by clicking to your left. If you enjoyed this tale of unexpected connection, please don't forget to subscribe to our channel and like this video. Every day we bring you unique stories